All right, so now we're in the Rheinhessen of Germany with Seehof's Weissburgunder. Oh, wait, this side. And Weissburgunder is basically just Pinot Blanc. Burgunder is a tribute to Burgundy, if you will, in German. So there's Spätburgunder, which is Pinot Noir. And then there's Weissburgunder, which is white Burgundy. Wait, which makes me think it should be Chardonnay, but it's not. It's Pinot Blanc. That's interesting. The first time I thought about that. Spätburgunder, Weissburgunder, and Grauburgunder, which is Pinot Gris. So yeah, so it's all just different versions of Pinot Noir. So the Burgunder part must just be not related to Burgundy. We'll look this up after. Anyways, let's talk about this one. So Seehof is a really interesting producer out of the Rheinhessen. And just some background on the Rheinhessen, it's kind of like, or has been, the most looked down upon region of winemaking in Germany for a while. It's kind of like been whatever relative to the Rheingau or the Mosel or Pfalz around it. And it's been changing mainly because of a guy named Keller who has really, well, I should say that, but that's relative to the conventional wine world. It's coming on the map because of a guy named Keller, who just so happens to be this guy's brother-in-law. So he's married to his sister. But it's also coming more into the spotlight, specifically in the natural wine world, because in the natural wine world, a lot of regions that don't get as much press, I guess, end up producing some of the really exciting natural wines because the prices to go there and experiment and sort out what will and will not work are easier and more, conducive to natural winemaking to occur. So that's one aspect to it. The other aspect is it's already a lovely region. Like it's got beautiful terroir. It's got like a limestone soil that's great for this. I think it's just more flat than some of the other regions. So when you think about traditional German winemaking, it's not the first one that comes to mind. But anyways, those two things together make this producer incredibly interesting. And he's using a grape that is fairly traditional for the region. And honestly, I have looked into it. There's actually not that much that I found about this wine in particular. So we're going to be making some assumptions about what he did here. We know what it is. We know it's Pinot Blanc. We know that the vintage is quite young, 2020. We know that, I don't know if it's a special vintage, but like it has a different label than what he normally puts on. So I don't know if he's just changing his labels or if he did something special for the 2020 vintage. We know that it is fairly low ABV, 13%. So about exactly in the middle of where you'd expect. And yeah, we know the grape. So we're pretty much on the same page there. Everything else I say from here on out is just my exact guesstimate because there's not a lot going on with this wine, or not a lot out there about this wine. There's a lot going on with it. So on the nose, at the top, I don't actually know. I've said this before, like you can almost smell when something is going to taste waxy, if that makes sense. And I don't know exactly what that smell is, but it's not that uncommon for like Pinot Blanc and Grauburgunder, which is Pinot Gris, to have a waxiness to it. It honestly has some components that make me say like, oh, like this is similar to a Riesling, but it's also not. Like you would think that there's maybe this component of, what's it called? Like a little bit of petrol, but maybe I don't actually think it's not the same thing. Petrol versus like waxiness are slightly different, but they're kind of close to each other, and I can feel that here. There is a definite floral component here. So it's like a bunch of tiny flowers. I don't know what the teeny tiny ones are, like even smaller than daisies. The really white tiny ones that go in bouquets, those. Don't know what they are, but that's what I'm getting here. And then on the bottom, more lime than lemon, I would say. Honestly, it has a ton of minerality as well, which, I guess I said that it has a lot of limestone earlier, so that should make sense. So I'm just going to say limestone because I've cheated and I now know that that's the rock. It's impossible, I feel like, to actually know what rock it is, but we're going to say limestone. And I would say that has like a little wet quality to it. It's like limestone gravel that just got rained on. It smells delicious. So let's try it. Oh yeah. So that is just like, that just has texture for days. And I feel like it's funny because I limit the amount of white wines that I put in because the general public doesn't love white wines, but like Psalms love white wines. And I think it's just because there's typically more nuance to them. Also, they're easier to drink if you're going to drink more, which we end up drinking more ultimately. But they just have such little subtle nuances that, of course, reds can have as well. But I just think it's easier for whites to have them. Like this is a price performing white wine here. This is not like some crazy, like it's got a Stelvin enclosure. It's like screw top. Like there's nothing like, it's not, he's not trying to be super fancy here, but like it's pretty fancy. Like it's about as fancy as wines get for its, little Stelvin enclosure. All right, so we're just sorry that I just got caught up on the texture because like that is like seductive. But let's go back to the taste. Okay, so finish, lovely, long. Starts out with almost like a spritiness to it, which is, not as sexy and seductive as I just said, but I think I did say earlier that it had like a bit of a soda-y-ish quality to it. Might have been the one before, not sure. But if I didn't, like it definitely has this whole tangy lemon lime thing going on. And then after that, it does have the minerality. And I feel like it has other fruits too, but I'm really struggling to like quite place my finger on it. I feel like it's just generally more floral and more mineral than the fruitiness, which is, I think, exactly like I was saying earlier, like that's something that a basic wine is just fruit, and there's nothing wrong with that. Fruit is amazing, but it is more complex and it is more difficult to get what they call secondary characteristics out of it, which is typically minerality, floral notes, and then there's tertiary parts, which is basically anything you've done to the wine, which could be aging it, which could be putting oak on it. So the more it has of secondary and tertiary notes, the more complex it generally is. So it's interesting because a lot of times I would expect it to have age to maybe achieve that, but I think it must just be something about the plots that they're working with. They must just be very mineral driven or something. I literally just made that up. I have absolutely no idea if that's actually a term that people use in wine, but it sounded good, right? But I really feel like that's like what it is. Like there is certainly other fruit here, but like it feels wrong to comment on it more because what I'm really getting are these lovely floral notes. Also, to be fair, I have left this out for a bit, so it's slightly more warm than I would normally serve it at. I've already had some earlier, so you might be getting more fruit if it's slightly colder than I am now. But yeah, so this lemony limey thing definitely has like some apples in it, and it finishes with just these beautiful mineral and floral notes. So with all that in mind, pairing it, there's a lot of ways you could go here. So I would put it with, I just want to say German food because it is German. But like the acidity, it's there, but it's not super high. So I wouldn't, which actually is very impressive when you think about it. So I wouldn't like go nuts with that. Oh, you know what? Okay, so this is probably one that I would put with your Asian foods. It doesn't have like a bunch of residual sugar or anything, but it also doesn't have the crazy acidity. So I feel like it's a perfect type of German to put with something that has maybe like, don't go higher than like a medium acidity. And again, this all depends on how your preferences are with spicy foods, but I think this could go all the way up to like medium spicy foods. So lovely with your Indian foods, lovely with Korean, whatever, anything that's high, something that has spice. And then if you're going to go not Asian, which is tough because I love to put my German wines with Asian, but if you're going to not do that, you could also go German. Like I was saying earlier, you could go with some schnitzel or spatzel. That would work. Yeah, I will actually just end with that because I think those are the right recommendations and I don't want to mess those up. So enjoy, but if you do it right, I think it's correct with Asian. That's what I'm going to do. So enjoy.